right, we're going to get straight into the Q&A. People have done a lot of homework. I've got a lot of questions here, which is great. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to alternate between some of those questions and getting questions from the floor. And it would be good to start with a question from the floor if we have one. And as is the customary practice, if you can identify who you are, where you're from, and make sure it's a question. Is there anyone? You'd be amazed how often that advice isn't taken, so I just remind people. Anyone in the audience want to start with one? So I'll do one from these to start with then. There's plenty on energy and climate change for you, Premier. One being around, you showed that amazing story of Tassie in terms of net zero emissions. Do you think there's other things that Tasmania can do in terms of, really marketing its renewables credentials to global companies and to the world in terms of a real competitive advantage?
Well, the simple answer to that is yes. And in fact, that's one of the reasons why John Perry, who's here today, when we came to government, we put on a Coordinator General, somebody that would actually take the opportunities that Tasmania has both nationally and internationally. And so I think there is a great opportunity there. But I think I note that we've got Hydro here in the room. I think they do a very good job of self-promotion, but I think that we should be doing more. They are. I got a smile out of the Hydro table, which is unusual. But they are one of the best generators in the world, and in terms of hydro, with the 50 to 70 years worth of investment and knowledge that has been built up, and already, they do provide advice to companies, especially in some of the developing parts of the world. But we should be very proud of what we've got, and I think that as far as being a renewable energy hotspot, I think it fits very well with the Tasmanian brand.
All right. Has that sparked any interest of a question out in the audience? Surely there's a question. I'll keep going for the time being with the some of the questions I've got here, and we'll stick with climate change for just a little bit longer. One of the questions is, how will you work with the Commonwealth on climate change?
Well, I've said already, I think Tasmania has an opportunity to lead in this space and to bring other jurisdictions along with us, the Commonwealth is included. We have the benefit of significant investment into our renewable energy base. We have the benefit of the carbon sinks that we have in our forests. But there is so much more that we can do. One interesting thing, and just talking about EVs, we've been looking at electric vehicles here in Tasmania. I was surprised when I became the Climate Change Minister that we only have, I think it's 158 EVs in the entire state. In terms of the government fleet, I'm sorry to say we only have 2. And so there is an obvious opportunity for the state to take a leadership role, especially now that we've rolled out one of the most geographically diverse, in fact it's acknowledged by most of the major car industry players, that Tasmania has the most geographically diverse EV charging network out of anywhere in the country. And so we are so very well placed to take some very strong steps in that direction as well. And in terms of, as I say, the Commonwealth, other states, my view is that we can actually lead and have them come with us.
All right, we do have a question right here in the front.
Hello, thank you. Mike Blake, retired public servant, or whatever that was. Look, I've got a question, Premier, in terms of health. I've been critical of the way we spend our health dollar in the past, and I was interested in your extra money that you're going to put into health. Good, well done for that, I think. What I'm more interested in, though, is how much are you spending on public health, preventative health, which I think is actually perhaps more important.
Mike, that is a very good question. And in terms of our focus, certainly in terms of Jeremy Rockliff's role and with the new Health Minister, we have to be better in the preventative health space. Now, one of the things that is challenging in Tasmania in terms of our EDs especially, is that we end up with a lot of people in there that really don't need to be in there in the first instance. And so there are measures that we can take in terms of ensuring that we invest to provide people with a healthier lifestyle and options. But there are also measures that we can take to ensure that we can provide the care that people need at the right time in the location that they need it. And I don't know if we've got anyone here from TASCOS, but they've done some very good work in terms of where the greatest demand is for health services and in terms of the public health model, and what we could do in terms of ensuring that we provide alternate service models that might better ensure that those people are looked after before they even get to our hospital door.
All right. I might throw a question Christina's way, and it might be of interest to people in the room. I think one of the areas where clearly monetary policy has been working has been the lower Aussie dollar. So interested in your thoughts about what the Australian dollar is going to do this year, particularly given all of the global events that we've discussed today.
Okay, yeah, so the Aussie dollar tends to be driven by a couple of major factors. So first of all, commodity prices are very important for the Australian dollar. So strengthening commodity prices tend to put upward pressure on our currency. The other major driver is interest rates. So specifically sort of the difference in interest rates between Australia and the other major economies. So what's been happening is we've had both those factors sort of working on either end of the spectrum. So we've had quite high commodity prices, but then we've seen the RBA lower the cash rate. So that sort of differential between Australia's interest rates and global interest rates has moved lower. So they've sort of broadly been offsetting each other. What also happens with the Australian dollar is when sort of uncertainty lifts or when there's any concerns about the global backdrop, we tend to see the Australian dollar depreciate, and that's in fact what we've seen recently. So we've now seen the Aussie dollar drop below 66 cents. We think it could move a little lower in the near term, so perhaps down to 65 US cents in the near term, just as those fears around the coronavirus and the global outlook are heightened at the moment. Looking ahead, we do think obviously that this coronavirus is going to pass, and then those sort of fundamental factors will come more back into play. So we think sort of over the course of the year, the currency will dip lower initially, but then we should see it sort of appreciate again. And our forecasts are for the currency to end the year about 67 US cents, so just a little higher than where we are now.
Thank you for that. Any questions? Any questions? We've done too well at these cards. People have been very good at filling them out. I might go to another one here for you, Premier. On this, you mentioned the strong performance on population that you've had in this state. One of the questions that's come from the audience is around the state government's view on migration policy. And obviously we've seen a move in a number of states around taking advantage of regional migration policy, these designated area migration agreements. Does the government have a position or policy stance on migration at the moment?
Well, very positive about migration. In fact, we increased the cap, I think it was from 1,700 to about 2,700 or 2,800, I think. I'm just looking for a nod. But so we are very keen on having migration occur, especially in the skills space. And we're seeing that occur in Tasmania. I must say one of the things that has been very positive for the state, though, has been the fact that we're seeing stronger migration patterns come from the eastern seaboard especially. And interestingly enough, and I think, I'm not sure if the university research is in the room, but I did read an article recently that a lot of the migration, in fact around 60% of the people that had migrated to Tasmania had indicated that it was for climate related reasons. And so in my mind, I think that we will actually see an increase in population growth over coming years as we start to see more people take the opportunity to come to a state like Tasmania that is seen to be relatively more safe, and especially if we've got jobs where that seem to have relatively more opportunities as well.
All right, so I've just been given the sign for our last question, which I think is down the front here again.
Now, Mike, don't bowl me on this one if you go.
Premier, and maybe Christina's got a view as well, I don't know, but we had an appeal from this table about tax reform. Is there an appetite for tax reform? Can we talk to the other states? I think you mentioned in your presentation that we're exposed to the GST going down, our share going down. So what are we going to do about it? Is there a case for tax reform? We had a review done a few years ago, but went nowhere. Is there a case now?
Well, obviously at Board of Treasurers and at KIFA, the wider Treasurers Conference, tax reform is oft debated. The challenge with tax reform is that, especially in terms of our mix here, we are too small and we are too exposed to go it alone. And that was the outcome. That was what was the outcome that was reached in the, if I remember rightly, the 2010-11 process that was run when Lara Giddings was Treasurer. But at a national level, conversations are ongoing. The challenge with tax reform, especially in a jurisdiction like Tasmania, is that we have around 40% of households that would be disproportionately impacted in terms of their income. That is in terms of a broadening of the GST base, and so you need the Commonwealth Government to play a transitional role. They have not been prepared to take on that role, and certainly at this point in time, the New South Wales Government is running under David Thodey a review of the state federal taxes, and we'll expect to see some recommendations from that. But the point that I would make in terms of tax reform, certainly from my side of politics, we have a view that less tax is better than more tax. And the way that our system works at the moment, politically, it would be very challenging to introduce any of the broad-based mechanisms that people have been discussing. And I think Christina mentioned that in her commentary in terms of whether or not the political opportunity or appetite is there. So we've got an eye to it. At the moment, I have to say, and stamp duty is often the one that is pointed to as being inefficient. It's a transaction tax. I'd say it's working beautifully at the moment. It's certainly not impacting, it's certainly not stopping people from purchasing properties, and the market's working quite well.
Did you want to add anything there, Christine?
No, nothing really to add. The coalition government did have company tax reform on the agenda for quite some time, and there was, a push to try to lower company taxes, but I think that was just politically very difficult, and that seems to have sort of gone off the table for now.
All right. Well, we've run out of time. Can I thank Christina and the Premier for sticking around for questions, and to you for diligently filling out some forms and giving me plenty of questions to ask. It's now my pleasure to reintroduce Lyndall again to move a vote of thanks.